Wonderful. We have more people joining. Vanya, I hope that is you, the Vanya, the one and only Vanya I know from Sinclair Community College. Is that you?
Yes, it sure is.
Wonderful, wonderful. Vanya does a fantastic course on race and history.
Oh, bless your heart.
So,
Thank you.
yes, I was able to present at one of her classes, and she introduced me
And
to
she
a
did a wonderful job.
thank you. She introduced me to a course that's being run by the YWCA, which is about race and psychology. And given that I'm a clinical psychologist, I am just fascinated. I attended my first session last week, and I'm definitely going to be doing it. So these courses are offered for free to the community. So if anybody is interested in them, please do let me know. On that note, I have started recording, and my name is Primrose Igonor. I was the Belonging and Equity Director at Marion Technical College, and I am now at Columbus State. However, I want to, because I had invited our speaker today, I wanted to ensure that I was able to facilitate this event. So I am going to make sure that I get through our calendar for this semester. For those of you that joined a bit later, I said to M, I said, M, do you please mind putting your pronouns next to your name? And the reason I did that is on a couple of occasions, I unfortunately and regrettably misgendered M. Fortunately, they were very gracious to accept my apology. And they also explained the importance of correct pronoun usage because they told me the suicide rate for individuals that are misgendered is higher than for those that are not misgendered. So I humbly thank you for that teachable moment. And like I said to them, I have to be intentional in my use. I can't have the excuse of saying that I have lived in a binary world all my 51 years. I turned 51 yesterday. I have to say I need to respect individuals. I know I will make mistakes, but I need to be able to humbly apologize, say I will do better, and actually do better. So I hope that is inspirational to to everybody on this call. Uh, just to say that even those of us in the DEI space make mistakes because we're human, just like everybody is. But if we can humbly apologize, say we'll do better, and actually do better, then that's very important. So, on that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the speaker for this session, Being Trans in a Small Town. M works for Ohio Health as a behavioral health provider, as one of the few non binary therapists locally. Therapists, big need. So we're thankful for that. M graduated with their Bachelor's of Social Work from Adrian College in 2014 and with their Master's of Social Work from the University of Michigan. In their free time, M is a co-director for Marion Area LGBTQ plus Coalition and enjoys being involved in the community. M lives with their husband Chris and their two dogs, Lucy and Charlie, here in Marion. Very interesting and fun names. I will say, after having spoken to M, the presentation will be made over the next hour. And at that point, then it will be open for questions and answers. That's the preference of the presenter. So over to you, M. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Primrose. I appreciate it. And to answer the question in the chat, if someone's not comfortable putting their pronouns, I completely understand. This is a safe place, and I want people to feel safe. So, so today we're going to be doing a slideshow presentation over my topic of trans awareness, and I will include my email at the end for anyone who wants to email me questions if you don't get a chance to. Um, and if we run out of time. or anything like that. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and share my screen and kind of get us going. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Are we good? Please tell me I'm good. Okay. Oh, Lord have mercy. So, all right. So we are going to cover a couple different topics today, including what is transgender, so understanding the definition and kind of what that entails. We'll also kind of go through my story at coming out as well, and as well as some local statistics over our community, Marion County's community, LGBTQ population and things like that, some statistics from this year, as well as some of the trailblazers that led the trans movement. The trans liberation movement starting in the 50s. So, all right, good deal. So, what is transgender? Transgender, the clinical definition, denoting of relating to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their sex, what they were, their birth sex. So, obviously, if someone is cisgendered, they do identify with their body. So, transgender individuals may or may not include gender dysphoria or euphoria. Gender dysphoria is a condition where a person might experience discomfort or distress because of their mismatched sex and identity. So, euphoria is the opposite. That's more of a comfort or a joy in thinking about one's true gender, usually accompanied by a strong desire to change or present in a certain way. So, euphoria and dysphoria are not needed to be trans, obviously. So, um, these are just some things. You'll probably hear me use a few different abbreviations here: AMAB, AFAB, and AGAB. So I have those listed at the bottom. AMAB is assigned male at birth. If your birth certificate read male, or if AFAB, which is assigned female at birth, or assigned gender at birth, which is just kind of a neutral term for anyone. So we can see here with my transgender umbrella, the transgender community typically is divided into two separate subcategories. We have binary and non-binary. Your binary are typically people who identify as trans men or trans women. They appear more cis and identify more in that matter. So non-binary is everyone else. So these a lot of times are your gender fluid, bi-gender, agender, genderqueer, demi-boys and demi-girls, things along those lines. People that might not fit in that spectrum or in those nice clean boxes. So going back and talking about dysphoria a little bit, that you'll probably hear me say, there's some words I'll use when it comes to top or bottom. So top surgery, bottom surgery, top noting that any sort of top dysphoria or top surgery has to do with the waist and above, typically using chest and breast tissue, while bottom surgery or bottom dysphoria or euphoria is waist and below. So some people will use dysphoria and improve euphoria with chest binders or breastplates to mimic the body they want to look like, packing, which is a penile prosthetic in the pants, or tucking, which is creating a smooth crotch area, essentially. So if anyone is interested or curious or wanting to know more about any of those sort of things, tucking and binding in particular can be, if they're not done properly, can damage people's risk of not being able to have gender affirming surgery in the future. So doing it properly and correctively is really important. So, all right. So this here is the gender unicorn. It is presented by the Trans Student Education Resources. This is a blank version. The next slide will be mine. And just kind of going over a few more definitions here. So I'm sure many people already know these things, but it's always good to start at a level playing field. So gender identity, our first topic, is how you view your gender, how you identify. Is it traditionally cis male, cis female, or somewhere in between? The next one is gender expression, and this is how we dress, how we express ourselves. So this could be hair, makeup, body modifications, clothing, piercings, tattoos, things along those nature. So sex assigned at birth, we have 3 different categories here. Traditionally, we've always thought of male or female, but we do also include intersex in that category as well. Intersex individuals, formerly known as hermaphrodites, um, are persons whose genitalia, gonads, and even chromosomes may not align perfectly with either male or female. So that could include a lot of different looking conditions. It's not a very distinct looking uh, image. So, and then physical attraction. This is, are you attracted to women, men, or other genders? This is where we see people who you want to be intimate with. This is your bisexual, pansexual, gay, lesbian, asexual, a lot of different types of things. And then emotional attraction, that is your romantic attraction. So some people are demi-romantic, aromantic, hetero-romantic, homo-romantic, trying to get my words right, and a wide variety. So I'm only naming a few. Because emotional and physical attraction can vary by person. So also, this chart does not tell the difference between romantic attraction and platonic attraction, which that can sometimes be different for people too. So, all right. And then this is my unicorn. So the red dots that we'll kind of see here. So underneath gender identity, you see the red dot for myself under others. My gender identity currently is agender. And I say currently because I've kind of fluctuated over the years. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So I identify as neither male nor female. I use they, them pronouns. And feel not connected to a specific gender. So my gender expression varies on the day. Some days I'm more feminine and I'll wear dresses. Some days it's more masculine, wearing button downs or my binder, since I am assigned female at birth and have breast tissue. Other meaning it just kind of fluctuates. I like gender bending a little bit too, wearing like a button down and a bow tie with maybe a skirt or vice versa. Um, sex assigned at birth, like I said, I'm female. The physical attracted and emotional attracted parts here at the bottom, I have not figured that out about myself yet. And I'm still working on it. I'm married to a cis male, and he is a wonderful human. And other than that, I haven't really explored much more of where I am on this scale. So there's always room for growth and change, and nothing has to be set in stone. So, all right. Now we'll get into some of the good stuff after we kind of went through all that. We'll talk about my transition and my story, because that's kind of why you're here. So that you can get to know me a little bit more and a little bit about what it's like being trans in a small town. So, and I'm going to kind of share it through pictures, if that's all right with all y'all. All right. You guys get to see baby pictures of me. Haha. So I was a very cute child. So here's a few different pictures of me, kind of ranging from being, as young as 1 to, I think the one picture down at the bottom with the cows, I feel like as I was probably closer to maybe 13 at that age. So I was born AFAB in Wyandotte County, which is the county north of here. I grew up on a small cattle farm, and I was in 4-H. I was not in FFA. And I have one younger sister that you can see there, and I had no brothers. So, and I was raised a tomboy. I worked on the farm. I did a lot of hard labor to help with raising cattle and taking care of the fields and lots of gardening. So I grew up, the farmhouse, which is where my grandmother lived, did not have sanitary water growing up. So our sanitary water was actually located in the barn. And during the winter, I remember walking out with giant clear jugs of empty jugs from that had Kool-Aid in it growing up, or fruit punch, and filling them up out in the barn where we got the water for the cattle and bringing it back in, even if there was a lot of snow on the ground. The well connected to the neighbors that we used. So but I was always a tomboy, or a girl that acted like a boy, I guess is the best way to describe it. Looking back, I probably should have known I was a little bit more than that. Um, but we didn't have the verbiage for trans and non-gender conforming individuals in the 90s, at least where I was. No one talked about that. So um, my exposure was limited. So, but growing up, I had long hair that I always wore in a ponytail or a braid. A lot of times I'd tuck it up underneath a ball cap, kind of secretly hoping people would mistake me for a guy, you know, or that they would drive up to the farm and they say, "Boy, where's your dad?" You know, asking me where my dad was. And I also had some hesitancy from, uh, makeup and jewelry and dresses and things that were more traditionally feminine. I had no desire for, unlike a lot of my peers. So here's a couple pictures from high school and the beginning of college for me. So the one here to the left with all the trophies, that was one of my senior pictures. So and some of my 4-H ribbons and trophies. And then the other one is my sister and I as we're older. And a lot of times we would take the cows out and the fair calves and steers to walk to get them ready for show. So um, so typically my aesthetic was straight jeans when flare jeans were in style, and I didn't wear makeup. I mostly wore t-shirts. I wore clothes that I could wear on the farm and, could get dirty if needed. So I took care of the farm before and after school and up until I moved to college. Um, and I went to college in a small town, very similar to Marion, about the same population, a little similar demographic makeup with a little bit of a higher population of Hispanic and Latino communities in that area. Um, it was a small private college called Adrian College in Southern Michigan, not too far from Toledo. I majored in social work with a minor in religion. I had intentions of possibly going into seminary at the after school, but decided on some different paths at that time. So I was involved in Greek life. I was in a sorority, which is a female, all female uh, group. So, and religious life, I was also involved in band, including pep band, marching band, jazz band, concert band, you name it. And I did my bachelor's practicum at a local community mental health, working with people with severe mental illnesses. So I got a lot of really good experiences. And this was between the years 2010 and 2014. And like I said, we didn't have the vocabulary for non-binary individuals at that point. My sorority and the band I was in had a large population of LGBTQ people. I knew that my sexual orientation at that time, my romantic attraction was heterosexual. And I didn't really identify within the community, but I was a strong ally. So, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit of my expression in grad school. So, I mentioned to Primrose earlier, I'm getting over a cold, so you'll probably see me take a drink once in a while. All right. So I absolutely love both these pictures. I think they sum up my gender expression in the best way. Coincidentally enough, both these pictures were taken about a month apart. And this was in grad school. I still did not identify as transgender at this point. I didn't even identify, in the LGBTQ community at this point. I thought I was a straight white female. And um, I didn't own a lot of my own masculine clothes at this time. And I typically would take them from my boyfriend or my male partner at that point. But I started to dabble in masculine clothing in my professional wardrobe. I did my master's practicum in Ann Arbor, which is a very progressive town. And I didn't get very many second glances, thankfully. So I did not own a binder at this time either. And because my breast tissue is fairly dense, I don't have the ability to compress my breast tissue to have a flat chest, no matter how much I bind safely. So passing, I use that with air quotes here, is not essentially doable for me at this point. So, all right. And these last two photos are me within the most recent 5 years. So, or 6 years, excuse me. The picture on the left is when I started my first job as a hospice social worker with my LSW. I I lived at home still with my parents, and this was in 2015. So you can see I still have long hair in the back, but I started buying more masculine clothing at local thrift stores, Salvation Army, Goodwill, some consignment shops, mostly including bows, ties, mostly clip-on ties and bows because I didn't know how to tie them at the time. I had to teach myself that. Um, and suspenders, love suspenders. As a plus size person, pants and shirts are fairly challenging to create an androgynous or masculine figure when you have curves. So that's a common concern in the trans community or non-binary community when you're trying to look more androgynous or more masculine. I have known some people who have gotten cosmetic surgery and plastic surgery for defeminization, shaping up their jawline, reducing their hips, liposuctioning the hips type of thing to kind of be a little bit less curvaceous. So this second picture is actually when a year after I bought my own house here in Marion. And I chopped all my hair off. And that was the most terrifying experience of my life. I was terrified that my parents would disown me. Um, I grew up, like I said, in a very rural country family, very religious, very strict. And I had to make sure I was financially stable before I started my transition, um, so that I knew I was going to make it. And not everyone is as privileged as that. I recognize that. And for youth who are transgender, a lot are still closeted because it is dangerous for them to come out. In this picture, I have a little bit more of a soft pixie cut. As you can see in my camera, it's more harder edges, more defined parts, definitely more me. So um, the second part of my transition was more internal. I still didn't know I was trans in either one of these pictures, but that doesn't make me any less trans. Um, I, I knew from a young age I didn't want children. Childbirth, pregnancy seemed very uncomfortable and really terrifying to me. I had no desire to be a mother, even though I'm very maternal or paternal, whichever way you want to put it. But I was able to convince my gynecologist when I was 26 years old and single to perform a tubal ligation, which is permanent sterilization, typically clips on the fallopian tubes, um, which is practically unheard of in this area. Unfortunately, that gynecologist is no longer in this area. He has since moved. Um, and since the overturning of Roe v. Wade earlier this year, there has been a circulating list of gynecologists that will perform sterilization procedures without any prerequisites, including having children, being married, any of those things. So if you yourself or know someone that's looking for sterilization options, please reach out. Those options are available. So I know that is scary to be a female body person at this time in this world. So, and then these are the last couple pictures I have here before we transition again. And the first one here is my wedding day. So um, at that point, I had come out as trans. I had come out as gender fluid. That was my first step through my transition. And I actually used all pronouns, they, them, he, him, she, her at that point. Later on, I fell into the identity of agender, meaning without identifying with male or female. And it just felt more comfortable, kind of like putting on a piece of old clothing that just feels right. So, um, but my wedding picture was August of 2019, and I had officially come out to myself, my spouse, my friends, as well as some of my in social media, as well as my colleagues at work. And I chose to dress traditionally feminine here for my wedding, our wedding. But it doesn't make me any less trans. So the second photo is actually from this past summer. I went out to a local trivia night and by myself. And the pride letters across the hat are the non-binary flag colors. And the gender euphoria in this picture is top notch for sure. And I have thought more about what my transition looks like as I get older. I am 31, so I'm a uh, little older than some younger trans individuals who go through surgeries and stuff, but there's some people that are coming out in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s, or beyond, and that is completely valid. As of right now, I don't have any interest in hormone replacement therapy or HRT. My voice is fairly androgynous to begin with. I'm a little bit lower for an AFAB person. Um, and I've started going by M. My birth name is Emily. I don't consider it a dead name, but M is a more comfortable androgynous version of that, um, similar to what people have been calling me for many years. And I go by that a lot of places in my life. So I also have a chest binder. I have two different ones, a half one and a full one. And I'll wear that on occasion, depending on my mood and my style of dress. So I don't wear it if I know I'm going to be away from the home more than 8 hours, because binding for more than 8 hours is extremely dangerous, especially for young developing bodies in trans youth. So, but I have thought about top surgery. So that would be a double mastectomy, top meaning above the waist, or a breast reduction surgery even. So as for my bottom dysphoria, so below the waist, I think my next steps are going to be asking my gynecologist for a ablation, which is lasering off the uterine lining to prevent menstruation. My biggest dysphoria comes from menstruation and being misgendered. And but unfortunately, a lot of these surgeries or HRT and things like that are considered cosmetic or plastic surgeries, and are not a lot of times covered by insurances. And that it kind of proves that we still have medical community gatekeeping, who can and cannot have gender affirming surgeries and gender affirming care. So, all right. Next, we're going to go into the trans movement. So doing a little bit of history. I am a firm believer that if you belong to any minority group, knowing your culture, knowing your history, knowing the people that have come before you gives us a sense of connection and brings us closer together. And so we're going to go through 4 different instances of trans individuals, trans events that help to kind of shape what we have now. This is obviously not completely inclusive. There is a ton more, but these are some of the most key ones. All right. So the first one is Virginia Prince. She wrote the magazine Transvestia, the Journal of American Society for Equality in Dress, in 1952, and it was considered to be maybe the beginning of the transgender rights movement. She was a trans woman, her picture here, and she published Transvestia bi-monthly between the years of 1960 and 1980, with about 100 issues. Her readership was mostly white, middle professional class cross-dressers. The magazine offered, among other things, dozens of published life and life stories and letters contributed by other members. The magazine operated on the 3 core objectives, and I'm going to read this here since this is very specific. To provide education for those interested in subjects of unusual dress and fashion, to provide information to those who, through ignorance, condemn that which they don't understand, and to provide education for those who see evil when none exists. These 3 objectives, education, entertainment, and expression, were promoted in order to help readers achieve understanding, self-acceptance, and peace of mind, which I think is really beautiful, that a magazine could provide that for a very oppressed and trying to find the right word, uncomfortable topic for a lot of individuals. So Virginia Prince the beautiful woman she is, we really do have to contribute a lot of our movement from her. So the next is the Cooper Donut riots. So many people don't know about the Cooper uh, Donut riots. So this happened in 1959, after about 7 years after Transvestia started. This is when members of the LGBTQ community who hung out at Cooper's Donuts, a local donut shop in Los Angeles, uh, were routinely harassed by the police, and they fought back after 3 people were arrested, and they began pelting law enforcement with donuts and coffee cups. And it kind of shows how civil disobedience and even uh, real disobedience is um, always been a very connected to change in our country and our communities. So, and this is a picture from the Cooper Donut Shop. The next one that I'll talk about has happened in San Francisco. This was Compton's cafeteria riots. So this happened in 1966. Compton Cafeteria was a chain of cafeterias owned by Gene Compton in San Francisco between the 1940s and the 1970s. The Tenderloin District location was a popular meeting place for transgender people, especially trans women. They would congregate publicly in the city. It was one of the few places they could meet and be there, all night, because it and I'm getting ahead of myself. Excuse me. It was one of the few places that they could meet, and because as trans women, they were not traditionally accepted in gay bars due to transphobia. Before the riot, the cafeteria was usually open all night, and so that trans women and drag queens could gather and meet up after a long night of what they called hustling or sex work. Um, the riot the riot happened after management called the police to arrest someone under the crime of female impersonation. This was a trans woman, and she resisted arrest by throwing her coffee at a police officer. And subsequently, drag queens poured into the streets, fighting back with their high heels and their heavy bags, which I think is a wonderful image. So. Our last bit of history we're going to talk about is, of course, Stonewall riots as well as STAR. So the Stonewall riots, happened in 1969, and this was essentially a police raid at the Stonewall Inn in Manhattan, New York. There was a drag queen named Stormé Lavere, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, who we believe was the first to struggle with the police and spark the rest of the riot, and that the crowd started to fight back. Marsha P. Johnson who was a local street queen. That was her title for herself, and her picture is here at the bottom, and was present during that squabble. So this is what people believe to be the starting of the LGBTQ movement. And we hear a lot of places called Stonewall, or a lot of organizations that reference Stonewall. So, and let it be known that it was started and pushed through by trans individuals. So. And then the street transvestite action revolutionaries, which is STAR. Transvite is not a term that we use anymore. We use trans woman or trans man, just as more culturally sensitive words. So the STAR organization was formed in 1970 by trans women Marsha P. Johnson, her picture here at the below, and Sylvia Rivera, who is our picture to the top left. STAR was a radical political collection that also provided housing and support to homeless LGBT youth and sex workers in the lower Manhattan area. Sylvia and Marsha were both sex workers themselves, and were self-proclaimed mothers of this house, and typically would go out and hustle during the evenings and during the day to be able to support the trans youth and keep them from having to do the same. So the STAR STAR organization started to decline in 1973, but it laid a lot of foundational work for many other LGBTQ organizations to come. So, all right. Next section here is going to be what it means to be LGBTQ in Marion County. So let's kind of bring it back local, talking a little bit about that. So as Primrose said before, I am the co-director for the local Marion area LGBT coalition. We were founded in the summer of 2020 or 2022, excuse me, so this past summer, after some homophobic comments were made at a local graduation ceremony. I'm sure many people in the community probably remember that. That sparked a huge divide and huge debate. And this is what sparked our director, Shannon Pegg, to form this group. It started as a Facebook organization and has since grown. We have over 450 Facebook members. That's our primary social media that we use, but we are also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. So please give us a follow and give us a find if you can. We have also made connections to over 20 different local and state allied organizations. And I'm going to read this one as well because I have a huge list. These include the Marion Area Police Department, MPAC, the Marion Victim Assistance Program, the United Way, Ohio State Extension Office, GLSEN, OSU Marion Out Loud, NAMI, Adam H. Board, Marion WEC Community Center, the Marion DEI Alliance, Marion County Children's Services, the Guild, Marion Minority Commission, Ohio Health, Equitas Equality Ohio, Marion Mentors, Marion YMCA, Heart of Ohio Homeless Shelter, and Marion Voices, just to name a few. We're also working on getting involved with some of the businesses who want to identify as local allied businesses, and that includes Marion Brewing Company, Stitch and Skeen, and Shovel City Drinkery, to name a few, as well as Taste of Memphis. So we are always looking for businesses to show their support. So, and it's our hope to serve, power, and connect and advocate for the well-being of our diverse LGBTQIA community in community of Marion, Ohio, and the surrounding communities. So we welcome people from Morrow County, Crawford, Wyandotte, Hardin, and Delaware, all over. Anyone that needs a place to call home, we're here for you. So we conducted a needs survey to kind of help identify issues and some statistics about our local LGBTQ community. And some of those do include trans individuals. We kind of lumped sexuality and gender identity together. So some of that's a little hard to tease out, but I'll do the best I can. All right. So this was one of the statistics of our needs survey, which is just simply asking, what is your gender identity? So we surveyed the gender makeup of our Facebook group, and about a third of our coalition members identify as trans or non-binary. That is a huge section of our group. So the other 2/3 are cis, particularly cis male and cis female. So, and then we looked at age as well. We have a wide variety of ages. We have people under 18, all the way up to in their 60s. So we also did a youth's needs survey. I did not include that in this presentation. So, but the majority of our coalition is age 18 to 39, which is our Gen Zs and our millennials. Shout out for Gen Z rocking the election as well in a lot of states. So, and as you can see here, we didn't really have many people over the age of 70, and people in their 60s and 70s would have been in their 20s and 30s during the beginnings of the HIV epidemic that started in 1981. And that disproportionately affected key populations like sex workers, men who had sex with women, IV drug users, and transgender individuals. It was a very deadly illness and has since become a little bit more manageable in the medical community, but did wipe out a huge chunk of our population. So we definitely grieve the loss of those of our elders, essentially, those who were there at the beginning. All right. When did you first know you were not heterosexual or cisgendered or cisgendered? So um, our largest age group with this is actually 11 to 18-year-olds. This is our middle school and high school age. And our second highest being under 10. So we know that youth understand gender identity and sexual orientation. It's something that is innate into just our being. I probably would classify myself in, I didn't know what it was until I was closer in my 20s. But looking back and kind of going through those pictures with all of you, we know that I probably was that way back when I was, 10 or below, or even, somewhere in middle school. Um, we can understand that this is just not a stage, and it's okay to embrace that. So this one is heartbreaking for a lot of people. And it's, have you ever been rejected by family or friends due to your sexual orientation and or gender identity? So we had only 39% of our population that did not experience any rejection. So that's meaning almost 1 in every 3 LGBTQ people in our coalition have been rejected by family or friends, or both. That is a pretty high statistic. So we part of our coalition's job and purpose is to hopefully create a safe place, a space for people to have connection and growth and development and feel like they have a family. So as a mental health provider myself, I'm very interested in the mental health of my community, including my trans individuals and my LGBTQ peeps. So mental health really involves looking at a number of risk factors. And this can include poverty, home security, supportive friends and family, transportation issues, job issues, a number of different things. We have to look at someone as a holistic individual in their environment. And queer individuals are more likely to be discriminated against with work and housing, resulting in lower income levels, more unsupportive friends and family, etc. So this statistic only shows that 25% of our surveyed population is in need and not connected to a mental health professional. So that's actually really good. I would consider that. So 75% is already connected or don't feel they need it at this time, and that's a wonderful number. So I would encourage, if you or if anyone is needing mental health services, please reach out to myself, the coalition. I know Julie or Primrose or anyone else that you feel and trust that could help with connections. So we want to make sure that we're there for all of our community. So in conjunction with mental health, we talk about suicide attempts and suicide ideation. So thinking about hurting yourself. About roughly 70% of our surveyed individuals have had some sort of ideation or attempt in the past. That's a huge chunk. And I'll talk a little bit more later on when it comes to how trans individuals, especially trans youth, are more likely to experience this when they are misgendered or not, or when their chosen names are not used properly. We'll talk about that in our ally section on being a good ally. And going along with that is, how comfortable do you feel seeking non-emergency health care in Marion County, having a primary care provider or having specialized health care? I'm pleased to know that about 60% of our members have a trusted healthcare professional, and that they are out to. While there are some healthcare individuals that don't show competence in healthcare, trans healthcare or LGBTQ medicine, there are many in the community that are allies and are supportive and at least willing to learn and grow. So. All right. And the last section here is building allyship. So for those on here who are not trans or not part of the LGBTQ community, this is a section to know how to be a great ally. And allyship, just like Primrose was saying earlier, it's all about humility and growth and change and participation. And I I'd never get upset when someone misgenders me. It can get exhausting, but I understand that these are hard things and hard languages to learn, and it's okay to make mistakes. So um, this is also one of my favorite pictures from The Good Place. If you've ever seen it, it's on Netflix. So, but what is allyship? It is the active support for the rights of a minority or marginalized group without being a member of it. And this goes for any minority group. This can go for our BIPOC communities. It can go with our Latinx and Hispanic communities. It can go with a variety of different ones. So how to be a good ally. Introduce yourself with your own pronouns. Primrose mentioned putting our pronouns on our name tags when on the Zoom call. This allows people that when you introduce yourself with your own pronouns, it is a hidden way of someone who is trans that might not be out, knows that you are a safe person, that you respect pronouns and you respect identities. Going back to that statistic I said I'd get to, we know that using chosen name and pronouns in youth can reduce suicide ideation up to 29% and suicide behavior up to 56%, which is huge in our trans youth. It is probably the #1 way to reduce suicide in youth, trans youth, is using pronouns and chosen name. So but this also includes using gender neutral greetings. So and honorifics. We have Mrs. and Mr., but we also have mix, MX, pronounced mix like MIX. If you don't know someone's gender, that sometimes they will use that as an honorific. Instead of saying welcome, ladies and gentlemen, we can say welcome all. Or if you've ever seen the movie or the musical Kinky Boots with Billy Porter, there is a line that says, ladies and gentlemen, and those who have yet to make up their minds, implying that there are more than two genders and that there's the fluidity between genders. And which is pretty powerful given that movie and musical was made in the earlier 2000s. So if you misgender someone, correct yourself and move forward. If someone corrects you, say thank you and keep going. There's no need for a profuse apology or explanation. I know that you might feel very upset and uncomfortable and sorry, and you want to make it feel better, but it's okay. It's okay to say thank you, repeat what you said with the right pronouns, and move on. It's my favorite way to remind people I'm non-binary is with a quote from The Good Place, which has Janet here, where she says, "Not a girl." On Tuesday, I worked the election here locally. I am a technician for the voting machines and everything. Some of you might have seen me if you came to my polling location, and I was working very hard to make sure that people tried to gender me properly with the people that I was working with, the other poll workers. Unfortunately, I said that to one person. She's like, you can go with this young lady. I was walking someone to a voting booth, and I said, oh, not a lady, just very plainly like that. And she said, you can go with this hag. And I walked the voter away, and I came back, and she apologized because I had told her before I left, I said, I'm trans. And she, older white woman, and she looked at me, she apologized. She said, I'm still learning. I didn't mean any offense. I was just, kind of trying to, make a joke, but now I understand that it wasn't okay. And so we can move forward. Amplifying trans and non-binary voices. So this is correcting someone's misgender even when that person's not around. So if I am not at a meeting with the coalition, or I'm not at one of our events and someone refers to me as she and another board member corrects them, that's good allyship. Even though I'm not there, they still are respecting me. And that's a huge thing. So it means I've been seen. Also sharing articles and publications, art by trans flocks, attending marches, events, donating to organization and causes, all of those things are wonderful ways to show support. And then lastly, do the emotional labor. It's not a trans person's responsibility to educate you. It is not any minority person's expectation and responsibility to educate you. If a person offers or has the emotional capacity and emotional space to educate, like I'm doing today, that's great. But not everyone has that capacity and that ability. So, don't expect your trans friends to know everything what it means to be transgender. I know that I am speaking from a white uh, perspective. I do not know what it is like to be disabled or part of the BIPOC communities. So I'm speaking through my own lens. Um, and that's okay. We can acknowledge that. Um, but everyone's story is a little bit different, which means there's no right or wrong stories. So, all right. And with that, I am done with my presentation. We are at 4:24, so I will kind of open it up for kind of a Q&A. Before we move on to that, if anyone is taking notes and would like my email to be able to reach out to me, it is Emily, EMILY, .D as in dog, H as in Harry, .Russell, RUSSELL, @gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you're needing anything or have questions. And also Primrose has my information as well. You can also reach out to the coalition as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Primrose on how she would like to conduct the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Em, for a great and informative session. And I know there's a number of questions in chat. So are you able to go through them?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
So,
But I also welcome individuals to please unmute yourself, ask questions, make comments. I think we learn also when we hear comments. For instance, a lot of what you talked about on a few things that you talked about kind of reminded me of the struggle that BIPOC folks have had to go through. So when you talked about knowing your history and knowing where it started and how important that is, that really resonated with me. And also the whole notion of passing. And I just wanted to start off by asking that question. So I grew up in South Africa, and everybody, well, I hope most people on the call know that there's a long history of apartheid, which means separateness and discrimination, where Black people had to stay in one area, white people could only stay in a certain area. And of course, white people were afforded really great things. And so we had what we call a colored population. We still have a colored population. And the word in the States is not really a correct word to use, but we still use it in South Africa. And a colored person was really somebody that was biracial, multicultural, and tended to have very light complexion skin. And so you'd hear a lot of stories about people, colored people, passing or pretending to be white just so they could have a better shot at life. And so to some extent, I can understand why people would do that, but many times there was also dangers involved in that. Because if you think about the fact that this person probably has a very long history of Blackness, quote unquote, in their genetics. And so let's say a colored woman would trick a white man into marrying her, and they would have a child, and that child would come out looking very, very Black, as in dark skinned, as in like myself. And so then issues would arise. Was I cheated on? And then finally, the person would probably have to talk about passing. So is that kind of what you meant? And if you could speak more to that.
of course, passing is very similar. It's the idea of kind of flying under the radar, blending in. So if someone who is a binary trans individual, a trans man or trans woman, and they want to fully transition both medically, socially, and so that they can pass as either a cis woman or a cis man, even though they are still trans, that is kind of what we use as that term. We also understand that transgender people and non-binary people do not owe anyone androgyny. They do not owe anyone the ability to have to pass for something, and that gender identity is a wide range of spectrum, and we can embrace it just like the rainbow. So, but sometimes it is a safety concern, especially when people are using restrooms, or things of those nature. If there's not gender neutral bathrooms or single
Mhm.
stall bathrooms, um, depending on how I look, I still use the female restroom, because I'm not quite sure if I'd be comfortable going into a male restroom, or if I'd be assaulted or anything like that.
Mhm.
Those
Mhm.
are things that are, can be safety concerns. So,
Absolutely.
but
So, just going back to the whole notion of a rainbow,
mhm,
another similarity with South Africa. So, when Nelson Mandela became the first Black president, he
mhm.
talked about the rainbow nation. So, again, diversity in our nation. And so, I was wondering, when did that whole analogy come up in the LGBTQ plus space?
So the rainbow has been part of the LGBT community for a long time. I believe we first started seeing that in following Stonewall, and if anyone knows, they can unmute themselves and correct me. But it started to embrace that the rainbow flag. I don't know off the top of my head, but each color of the rainbow typically represents someone else. The trans flag being blue, pink, white colors also represent different people. The blue are for trans masculine people, trans men. The pink is for our trans women and our trans feminine, and the white is for our non-binary and agender people. So the colors of all the different flags are representative to things,
Mhm.
and same with the rainbow flag. But I believe it started being used as a symbol for the LGBTQ movement following Stonewall and the first Pride in LA.
Great.
So.
Thank
And
you.
then, of course. So I'll go through the chat and kind of start with some of the questions. Wendy asked, is hermaphrodite a term that we should avoid using at this time? Yes. Hermaphrodite is a archaic term to mean intersex, meaning having sex organs from both male and female. We know that to be a outdated term. Same as transvestite or transsexual. Uh, those are outdated terms at this time. So, um, how long did it take them to get used to they them pronouns? I'm assuming that was from you too as well, Primrose. I'm assuming you were meaning like my support people and my husband and stuff like that. Um,
Actually, I was meaning you.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
So like I said in my presentation, I started with all pronouns, they, them, she, her, he, him, because I felt more fluid. And
Mhm.
then I settled on they, them after kind of finding that that felt the best. Um, when the best way I try to describe being misgendered is um, feeling like I get punched in the stomach. It provokes a very visceral response. And but I don't get that when I use they them pronouns. I do with he him or she her. So that dysphoria led me to start using more they them neutral pronouns. So if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Um, please explain detailed dangers of incorrect packing and tucking. So packing is not usually dangerous. Packing is where someone might roll up a sock, put it in their pants to kind of mimic a bulge of a penis. Tucking is where the testicles are pushed back up into the scrotum area, and the penis is usually pushed up in between the legs. And a lot of people will use some sort of duct tape or similar tape to secure it. Um, Obviously, having a person, a male AMAB person tucking for long periods of time to mimic a smooth genital area can cause lack of blood flow. Um, it can also cause deformities. It can damage tissue, things like that. So tucking in short periods of time, no more than probably 4 to 8 hours, is appropriate. The same with binding. So, yeah. How long did it take for you to identify as trans? Because you didn't know. or because you didn't want to know? That's a good question too. Um, I don't really know when it clicked, but I know that I started looking at what it meant to be gender fluid because I really enjoyed different forms of gender expression. And it felt, I got that euphoria feeling for it, dressing more masculine. And, coupling that with my sterilization surgery and things like that, everything started to kind of click a little bit more that I'm like, you know what? I feel like I don't fit one box or another. And that that helped me to navigate some of those emotions and some of those feelings. I have some wonderful people who are part of the non-binary community and trans community. One of my good friends had his top surgery, his double mastectomy, in Cleveland, and stayed with me during his post-op. So I got to take care of someone with who had just had top surgery, which is a very major surgery, if anyone can imagine. I also, as messed up as it sounds, bear with me. I worked in oncology. I was an oncology social worker for a while, and I found myself jealous of the women who had mastectomies and that were flat chested. And I realized that that wasn't right or normal. And I started thinking more into that and how I had some of that gender identity, like gender envy towards people that had smaller chest or no chest, no breast tissue. So obviously I didn't wish cancer upon myself, but I wanted to have that same look. So
Well, thanks for sharing that. That also shows such great self-awareness. So thanks for
thank you.
sharing.
Absolutely. How much does transitioning cost? Transitioning can cost a lot of things. There's something that we call social transitioning, which is where people start using new names, new pronouns. They might dress differently, things like that. They might bind or tuck. And then there's medical transition. So that's your HRT, your top surgery, your bottom surgery, things like that. That can cost thousands of dollars. My friend who had his top surgery, he paid out of pocket for top surgery and hip liposuction to defeminize his hips, was easily almost $15,000. And it was not covered by insurance. So that was something that he paid for out of pocket. He saved up for. Some people can like breast reduction surgery a lot of times sometimes can be medically covered if there's documentation of back pain and other health issues with it. Same with like a hysterectomy, but a penectomy, which is removal of the penis, or breast implantation, things like that are definitely considered more cosmetic. So Wendy asked if you don't mind sharing, was it hard to come out to your spouse and family? So I haven't come out to my family. It's on social media, my pronouns. I was in the newspaper. So I mean, I just haven't sat down and said, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm trans," because I'm an adult and they don't need to know those things unless I want to. You know, they don't use they them pronouns with me. They still use she her. It does hurt. And I've gone back and forth on if I want to actually come out to them. And that is still a journey I'm still working on. As for my spouse, I have a wonderful spouse. I remember sitting at the corner of Prospect Street and Church Street, right on the overpass, next to where Nathan's barbershop was. And I looked at him and I said, "I have something I need to tell you." And I said, "I think I'm agender." He said, "Oh, that's good. I thought you were going to tell me you were a guy, that you were, a trans man." And he's like, "I still would love you, but I know that would cause a lot of other things for us to work through, and he is still working on pronouns. He is still getting better at it. He's very gracious with all of that. And he compliments me if I look handsome or if I look pretty. So he's one of the best supports I have. All right.
So at this point, I would welcome, people to unmute yourself and ask questions. I am so grateful that M is so willing to share openly, candidly. So let's take advantage of that, right?
Please,
And
please.
learn as much as we can. There's one there in chat.
Okay.
Is it hard to be trans in Marion on a daily basis?
Like, is there a lot of harassment or aggression? I have not been particularly a victim of hate crimes. I know people who have. We were in the popcorn parade. Our coalition was in the popcorn parade, and we didn't really receive too terribly much hate. Prior to this presentation, Primrose had shared a voicemail that she had received from a community member that was very transphobic. Wasn't necessarily threatening or hateful, but was definitely not supportive of us having this presentation, which is why Primrose was very specific on letting people in from the waiting room to kind of vet to make sure this was a safe place. And I work for Ohio Health. I use a pronoun pin at work. I am very out at work, and I'm very thankful that my providers that I work with, I work in primary care, are all wonderful individuals and very open and accepting, and use my uh, um, and also use my pronouns regularly for the most part. I have lost clients as a therapist when they see my pronoun badge or when I ask them for their pronouns. They just don't come back. And I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea because some people like coffee, and that's okay. But when it comes to harassment and aggression, I have not been assaulted or anything like that. So Shannon did note in the chat that we have gotten some awful comments on social media, but Jeff Jackson, who's present, and then Shannon Pegg, who's also present, typically are really good at moderating those. So, and then religious, religion. Primrose discussed religion. I am not particularly religious. I was raised Christian. I was raised Methodist. My father's side of the family was Pilgrim Holiness, which I describe as one step above Mormonism. Very, very conservative. And at this point in my life, I identify more as spiritual. I don't identify with a specific faith. When my first job out of school was hospice, and I saw a lot of people die, and I like to believe that when people die, they just don't go into the dirt or they just cease to exist. I like to think that they're somewhere still with us. So so that's still a little blurry for me. And then is there something we can do to help trans kids in schools? I know some delightful teachers, and I know some older teachers who are very critical of trans LGBTQ issues. That was from Wendy. So our coalition is actively working to partner with local school districts. We have had some meetings with Harding and with Grant to help facilitate some connections and some support. We're having another parents meeting. So if you know any parents of LGBTQ youth or trans youth, please have them follow us on Facebook. We have a parents meeting coming up soon to kind of help see what their needs are. I know that I have voiced that I would really love to do a support group for a free support group for parents of trans individuals, but that's still all in the works. We have a lot of things on the stovetop, and they're all coming at one at a time. So, and
I
then
just put in chat that
yes,
Marion Tech would benefit from that type of conversation
oh wonderful,
because yeah, we have what we call college credit plus students. So they're still at high school doing college courses. And honestly, I have learned so much from them. And that's just because I happened to teach one of the courses they had to take.
yeah,
And they really taught me. And not everybody has that opportunity.
absolutely.
So please consider that. I don't know, is Matt on the call? Matt is our chair for our Welcoming Diversity Committee. Okay, I don't
Okay.
see. However, Wendy is on the committee. Wendy, would you mind please following up on the potential of this?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And I think we have another question in the chat from Melissa.
Yes,
She
I saw
asks,
that as
how
well.
do you
Yep.
figure out? Mhm.
Oh, sorry, Wendy. Wendy, if you can reach out to Shannon Peg in the chat to get our coalition's email, we'll get you connected and talk through there. So, but yes, Alyssa, I do want to address that. Alyssa's question was, how did you figure out you're trans or not? I've been struggling with my identity my whole life. You know, I don't know how I figured it out. I just did. And I know that sounds really awful. Um, it felt like I didn't quite fit in, and I didn't quite fit what it meant to be a girl, or what it meant to be a boy, or what it meant to be feminine or masculine. I didn't feel like I fit in one of those neat boxes. And there's some really good educational books out there surrounding kind of exploring identity, if you're ever interested in some books to read and things like that. But there's no right or wrong way to be trans. There's no, um, you know, it's okay to experiment with different pronouns, with different looks. And the thing is, you can transition and detransition, and that doesn't make you any less valid. Um, it's okay to be you don't have to identify trans and still enjoy dressing masculine. You know, that's okay, because we talked about how gender expression and gender identity are very different. Um, and boys can like makeup, and girls can like wearing masculine clothing. Like, that's okay. Um, so and I hope that answers that, Alyssa. And obviously, please reach out if you have any other questions. Um, and Do you feel like you belong here in Marion? I hear that this is an unwelcoming environment. I wonder if you feel that on the ground here. I think Shannon, who is our director, me and her complement each other very well. Would probably say that I am blissfully naive in a lot of ways. I think that our community is becoming more accepting. Following the River Valley homophobic comments, we saw an immense amount of support. And we have continued to see a great amount of support, and we recognize that the hateful and unaccepting parts of this community they're smaller than us now, and that's okay, and that's great. And we're here, and we're we can be there for each other, and we can show others that we can be there for each other. um I always encourage people too that if you don't feel comfortable being out in our town, explore Columbus in the dress and the makeup and the things that you want to, in a more accepting community, or even Delaware. um and it's okay to live that double life until you figure out who you are and if you're safe here. So
May I ask you a question? You said smaller. You talking about in numbers, or are you talking about in their what am I trying to say?
you're fine.
Psychologically?
I would say that the hateful comments and the organizations here in town that are very vehemently anti-LGBTQ and trans, they are smaller in numbers. They're just louder. And they scream a little bit louder. But I think that so many people are still closeted, still very quiet. And our coalition is made for people who are not quite sure where they're at yet, and they're not out and loud about it, and that's okay because safety is a concern, right? So we never want to endanger anyone. If that hopefully hope that answers your question, Vanya.
Yes, it sure does. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm not in Marion, but I am in another small community,
Yes.
Xenia. And
Okay.
yeah, so I suspect that there's a lot of similarities between
Probably
Xenia and Marion.
Sure, I'm sure. And then Danielle asked in the chat, do you feel more welcome here than you did in Wyandotte County? And I think that's kind of unique because where I grew up in Wyandotte County was very, I actually grew up more in the corner of Wyandotte, Crawford, and Marion County. So I went to a Crawford County school, but I lived in Wyandotte County and went to Wyandotte County Fair. So the time that I lived in Wyandotte County and went to school in Crawford County, I wasn't I didn't identify as trans at those times. So I didn't feel unwelcomed. I just felt different. But I do feel that Marion has more support for our community than Upper Sandusky and Wyandotte County does, because just sheer numbers, Wyandotte County is very rural. The entire county of Wyandotte was the same population as like my my college, that I went to, which was still pretty small. And so I think there's support when we can find it. It's finding those little hidden pockets of people that just they just understand and they just get us. So, but thank you so much, Daniel, for asking that too. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns that anyone would like to share in the comment section or verbally?
And while we wait for individuals to do that, I want to thank Em again and ask everybody to join me in thanking Em for a really great and informative presentation. And almost just as importantly, I want to thank each one of you for attending this session, because
Absolutely.
you are coming to learn new stuff. You're coming to learn maybe stuff that you have never been exposed to, or maybe stuff that you don't agree with. So it takes a brave person to come and hear directly, as it was, from the horse's mouth. And for then hopefully you to make a better judgment of how to proceed, how to be an ally, how not to be an ally, whatever the case, but at least you've heard the other side. So I just wanted to stress that, and thank everybody for being here. And when I mentioned this presentation to my current employer, my new colleagues were very excited. So don't be surprised if I reach out to you again and ask you to do something similar here at Columbus State.
Absolutely. You got my email, you got my number, you feel free. I've done quite a few speaking events over mental health and gender identity and things like that. So I enjoy
goodness.
public speaking. So
Fantastic.
So of course.
Okay. No, definitely keep that in mind. And I hope you're seeing all the thank yous in the chat.
I am.
Very well deserved.
Thank you so much for everyone attending. I really appreciate it. I recognize some names and there's some names I didn't, and I'm glad to be a part of all of this. So, and thank you for Rose for asking me and putting on this presentation, even though I know you've moved away from MTC. So
yes, you're welcome. You're more than welcome. Well, on that note, I will say goodbye, everybody. Take care till the next time. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to log off now. I'm just going to hit end.
You're fine. I was just looking through, making sure I got everything off the chat. So
Yes. Do you want me to, there's a way that you can save the chat. Do you want me to do that, or is that fine?
oh, I can do that actually.
Okay.
So I just wanted, I know you mentioned in here you wanted some books, and I wanted to make sure I got
Yes.
those to you. So
Okay.
and yeah, so but I think that was all that I wanted out of the chat. So, but yes, thank
Okay.
you so much, Primrose. You have a
Yes, you're
good
welcome.
evening.
Yes, you too.
Bye-bye.
And Wendy, bye. Bye, Wendy. Hey, Wendy. Let me stop recording, actually.